There's a moment that comes for almost every man at some point in his life, the moment he realizes she's chosen someone else. And in that moment, something in him wants to fight it, wants to prove himself, wants to show her what she's missing, wants to try harder, reach out one more time, say the right thing that finally makes her see. I want to talk about that moment because what you do in it says more about your future than almost anything else you'll do this year. Here's the truth. Nobody tells you in that moment chasing doesn't win people back. It pushes them further away. And it does something even worse than that. It costs you the one thing you can't afford to lose, which is your own self-respect. Think about what chasing actually looks like from the outside. The extra texts, the showing up where you know she'll be, the trying to explain, again, why you're the better choice. Every one of those moves comes from a good place. You love her, you don't want to lose her, but every one of those moves also quietly tells her and tells you that you're willing to shrink yourself to be chosen. And here's the hard part that never works. It has never once worked for anyone in the history of relationships. Desperation is not attractive. It never has been. And chasing someone who has already made her choice doesn't demonstrate love. It demonstrates a lack of self-respect that she can sense, even if she never says it out loud. This is the part that's hard to hear, so let me say it plainly. The moment you start begging to be chosen, you've already lost something more valuable than her. You've lost your dignity in the process of trying to win back someone who's already walked away. And dignity, once you've given it up chasing someone, is far harder to rebuild than any relationship ever was. Now here's what almost nobody talks about. The alternative to chasing isn't giving up on love or pretending you don't care. It's choosing to let the outcome be what it is without trading your self-respect to try to change it. That's a completely different thing. Letting go isn't apathy. It isn't pretending you're fine when you're not. It's a decision to face the loss honestly, feel it fully, and refuse to compromise who you are in an attempt to reverse it. That takes far more strength than chasing ever does. Chasing is easy. Chasing is just following the panic. Letting go with your head up is the hard thing. It's the rare thing. And it's the thing that actually preserves something worth having, which is your own sense of self. Think about every man you've ever genuinely respected. Chances are none of them got there by begging anyone to stay. They got there by having enough self-respect to walk away from situations that didn't want them, and enough self-belief to know that one person's choice wasn't the final word on their worth. That's not a coincidence. That's the pattern. Self-respect and chasing cannot coexist in the same moment. You get to choose one. And there's something else worth naming here. The version of you that chases is rarely the version of you that anyone actually falls for in the first place. People are drawn to steadiness, to someone who knows his own worth, regardless of outcome. The chasing version, panicked and pleading, is a smaller version of the man who was worth choosing to begin with. So in trying to win her back through pursuit, you're often presenting the least attractive version of yourself, the one built entirely around fear of loss rather than genuine confidence. So if you're standing in that moment right now, watching someone choose somebody else, feeling the pull to fight for it, to prove something, to change her mind, remember this. Chasing doesn't prove your love. It proves you're willing to lose yourself to keep something that's already gone. And that's a trade that never pays off, no matter how much it feels like it should in the moment. The moment you start begging to be chosen, you've already lost something more valuable than her. Protect that first. Everything else follows from there. Let's talk about something that shapes how you recover from rejection more than almost anything else, the story you tell yourself about what it means. Because here's what happens to most people when someone chooses another person over them. They don't just feel the loss. They start building a case against themselves. They start replaying every interaction, looking for the flaw, the mistake, the thing that must have been wrong with them to cause this outcome. And that's where the real damage happens, not in the rejection itself, but in the meaning you attach to it afterward. Here's what I want you to really sit with her choosing someone else is information. It's not a verdict. It tells you something about compatibility, timing, chemistry, what she was looking for at this point in her life. It does not tell you that you are unlovable, not enough, or fundamentally flawed. Those are two completely different conclusions, and most people, in the rawness of rejection, collapse them into one. They hear she chose someone else, and their mind immediately translates it into "there's something wrong with me." But that translation isn't accurate. It's just what pain does when it's looking for somewhere to land. Think about it logically for a second, outside the emotion of it. People choose partners for 1,000 different reasons that have nothing to do with objective worth. Timing, what they've been through before, what they think they need right now, even if that need isn't necessarily what's best for them long term. Familiarity, chemistry that can't be explained or predicted. None of that is a scorecard on your value as a person. Two genuinely great people can simply not be right for each other at this specific moment, for reasons that have nothing to do with either one of them being lesser than the other. This distinction matters more than people realize, because the story you tell yourself about rejection becomes the foundation for what you do next. If you decide the rejection means you're not enough, you'll spend the next months trying to prove that story wrong, trying to become enough in ways that are usually about winning approval rather than genuine growth. You'll chase validation instead of building a life. But if you understand the rejection as information rather than an indictment, something different becomes possible. You get to look at what happened clearly, take what's actually useful from it, and let the rest go without carrying it as a permanent verdict on your worth. This is also where a lot of people get stuck comparing themselves to whoever she chose instead, wondering what he has that you don't, running the comparison over and over, looking for the deficiency. But that comparison is almost always a trap, because it assumes there's some objective ranking system where one person simply beats another. There isn't. She didn't choose him because he's better in some universal sense. She chose him because something about him met something in her at this time in a way that clicked for her specifically. That's not a competition you lost. That's a match that wasn't yours to have. Separating your worth from her decision is not a mental trick to make yourself feel better. It's simply more accurate. Your value doesn't fluctuate based on who chooses you. It doesn't go up when someone picks you, and it doesn't go down when someone doesn't. That's not how worth works, even though rejection makes it feel exactly that way in the moment. There's a quiet kind of freedom in accepting this. Once you stop treating her choice as a referendum on your worth, you stop needing her to reverse that choice in order to feel okay about yourself. You can wish her well, genuinely, without that wish costing you anything, because your sense of self was never actually hers to hold in the first place. So the next time you feel that pull to interpret her choice as a statement about your value, stop and separate the two things. What happened is real. The story that it means something is wrong with you is not. Rejection isn't proof you're not enough. It's proof you weren't a match. And understanding that difference is where real healing actually begins. Now let's talk about something people get completely backwards: the idea that letting go means you lost. That walking away is somehow the weaker move, the consolation prize, the thing you settle for when you couldn't get what you actually wanted. I want to challenge that because it's one of the most damaging misunderstandings out there. And it keeps people stuck in situations long after those situations have already ended. Here's the truth: walking away isn't losing. It's refusing to compete for a place you were never guaranteed. Think about what it actually means to fight for someone who's already chosen someone else. It means positioning yourself as a competitor in a contest that was never officially yours to enter. It means treating her heart like a prize to be won through effort and persistence, rather than something she gets to freely give or not give. And when you do that, even with the best of intentions, you're not honoring her. You're not honoring yourself either. You're just refusing to accept an answer you don't like. There's a kind of quiet dignity in choosing not to compete for that. Not because you don't care, not because it doesn't hurt, but because you understand something important: love that has to be fought for, in the sense of convincing someone to want you when they've already decided they don't, was never going to be sustainable love anyway. Even if you somehow won that fight, even if the pursuit worked and she came back, what you'd have is someone who was persuaded, not someone who chose you freely. And persuaded love has a shelf life. It tends to need constant reinforcement, constant proving, because it was never built on genuine desire in the first place. This is why grace, in the moment of loss, matters so much more than people give it credit for. Reacting with composure instead of desperation isn't about performing strength for an audience. It's about protecting something real. When you let someone go without begging, without guilt tripping, without making her decision harder than it already is, you're demonstrating something rare, that your love for her was never about controlling the outcome. It was about wanting good things for her, even when those good things don't include you. That kind of grace often earns more respect, even from a distance, than any amount of fighting for her ever could. Not because grace is a strategy to win her back, it isn't, and shouldn't be treated as one, but because it's simply who you become when you value your own integrity more than you value winning. And here's something worth noticing: the people who handle rejection with dignity tend to move forward faster than the people who fight it. That's not a coincidence either. Fighting an outcome keeps you tethered to it. Every ounce of energy spent trying to change her mind is energy not spent processing the loss, learning from it, and building whatever comes next. Letting go, even though it's painful, actually starts the clock on healing. Fighting it just delays that clock indefinitely, sometimes for years, while you wait for an outcome that isn't coming. So if you're in that place right now, wondering whether walking away makes you weak, I want you to reframe that completely. Weakness would be staying in a posture of pursuit towards someone who's already made her choice, just because leaving feels unbearable. Strength is accepting reality as it is, even when it hurts, and choosing not to abandon your own dignity in an attempt to rewrite an ending that's already been written. That's not losing. That's one of the harder, quieter forms of winning there is. Walking away isn't losing. It's refusing to compete for a place you were never guaranteed. And the version of you who can do that with grace is already becoming someone stronger than the version who couldn't. Let's talk about something that's hard to see clearly in the moment, but becomes obvious with distance: the relationship you would have lost yourself in. Because here's what happens when someone chooses to leave, or chooses someone else over you. In the immediate aftermath, all you can see is what's gone. The future you'd pictured, the version of life you'd started building around her. It feels like pure loss, total loss, nothing but loss. But that picture is incomplete, and it takes time before the rest of it comes into view. Here's what I mean. Not every relationship that ends was actually good for you, even the ones that felt good while they lasted. Some relationships work because both people are equally invested, equally seen, equally chosen. But some relationships only work because one person keeps bending, keeps adjusting, keeps making themselves smaller or more convenient in order to keep the peace. And you don't always know which kind you were in until it's over and you can look back at it honestly. Ask yourself, without the emotion of the loss clouding it, were you fully yourself in that relationship? Or were you managing yourself, editing yourself, quietly shrinking parts of who you are to keep her interested, to avoid conflict, to hold on to something that already required constant effort just to maintain? This is where the reframe becomes important, not as a way to numb the pain, but as a way to see the full picture. Sometimes the door that closes was never meant to open. Not because you weren't good enough to walk through it, but because what was on the other side wasn't actually built for you to thrive in. It's easy to romanticize what could have been. It's much harder and much more useful to honestly assess what you were actually giving up of yourself to keep that possibility alive. Think about the time you would have spent wondering if she was thinking about you, checking your phone, adjusting your plans around the hope of her interest. Think about the energy you would have spent trying to be exactly who you thought she wanted rather than simply being who you are. Think about how much of your own growth might have quietly stalled while you were focused on winning someone over instead of building yourself. None of that is a small cost. It adds up, relationship after relationship, for people who never stop to notice it. This isn't about pretending the loss doesn't matter or rushing to convince yourself that everything happens for a reason in some vague, dismissive way. It's about being honest that endings, even painful ones, often save you from a version of your life that would have cost you more than you realized at the time. Time you would have spent trying to be chosen instead of building a life worth choosing. Energy you would have poured into a connection that required constant convincing instead of one that comes naturally. Self-respect you would have slowly traded away piece by piece without even noticing it was happening. So when you find yourself grieving what was lost, let yourself grieve it honestly. But also, let yourself ask the harder question underneath it. What am I actually free from now? What version of myself gets to exist now that I'm not spending my energy trying to be chosen by someone who's already decided? Sometimes the answer to that question is more valuable than anything the relationship itself could have given you. Sometimes the door that closes was never meant to open. And on the other side of that closed door is often more of yourself than you realized you were missing. Now let's talk about what actually happens after the loss settles, because there's a phase that comes after the initial pain that almost nobody prepares you for. It's not the grief itself, it's what the grief eventually demands of you, whether you're ready for it or not. Here's the thing about being chosen against. It doesn't just hurt, it disrupts something. It knocks you out of whatever routine, whatever comfort, whatever version of yourself you'd settled into while you were focused on her. And in that disruption, there's an uncomfortable kind of opportunity hiding, one that only shows up because everything else got shaken loose first. Every ending is an uncomfortable invitation to grow. Not because growth requires pain, it doesn't always, but because pain has a way of forcing questions that comfort never asks. What am I actually building for myself right now? Who am I when I'm not trying to be chosen by someone? What have I been avoiding personally, professionally, physically, that this situation is now forcing me to finally look at? Most people don't want that invitation. Understandably, it arrives at the worst possible time, wrapped in loss, and accepting it feels like adding work on top of pain you're already carrying. So a lot of people decline it. They sit in the hurt, they numb it, they distract from it, and eventually the feeling fades on its own without anything actually changing underneath it. And that's a completely human response. But it's also a missed opportunity, because the discomfort of rejection, if you actually let it do its work, is one of the most honest motivators available to you. It doesn't let you lie to yourself the way comfort does. It strips away the excuses. Think about the men you know who came out of a painful ending and actually changed, got healthier, built something real professionally, developed a clearer sense of who they are and what they want. Almost none of them planned that transformation in advance. It happened because the pain of the ending made staying the same feel worse than the discomfort of changing. That's usually how real growth starts. Not from inspiration, not from a random burst of motivation, but from a situation that makes the old version of yourself no longer tolerable to keep being. This is why the discomfort you're feeling right now, if you're in it, isn't something to rush past. It's not just something to survive until it fades. It's information. It's pointing you toward exactly the parts of yourself that have been neglected while your attention was elsewhere. Maybe that's physical health you let slide. Maybe it's ambitions you quietly shelved. Maybe it's friendships you let go thin, or a sense of purpose you haven't touched in a long time because you were focused on being chosen by one person instead of building a life that stands on its own. The discomfort is showing you where to look. Most people just need to be uncomfortable enough to actually look. And here's what makes this particularly worth leaning into the version of you that comes out the other side of doing that work isn't just recovered. He's upgraded. Not because losing her was secretly a gift, not because everything happens for a reason in some easy, dismissive way, but because you took an ending that could have just been loss and made it mean something more than loss. You let it build you instead of just breaking you. So if you're in that uncomfortable place right now, don't rush to make the discomfort disappear. Ask what it's pointing you toward instead. Let it become fuel instead of just weight. Every ending is an uncomfortable invitation to grow. The only question left is whether you're going to accept it. Let's bring this all the way home, because everything we've talked about today points toward one final idea, and it's the one that actually matters most. What does winning really mean after all of this? Not winning her back, not proving her wrong, not becoming so impressive that she regrets her choice. Something quieter than that, and honestly, something far more powerful. Here's what real winning looks like: becoming someone you don't have to convince anyone to choose. Sit with that for a second, because it's easy to hear and much harder to actually live. So much of the pain in rejection comes from feeling like you have to prove something. Prove you're worth staying for. Prove you're better than whoever she picked instead. Prove that her decision was a mistake. But chasing proof is exhausting, and worse, it keeps your sense of self tied to someone else's opinion of you. As long as you're trying to convince anyone of your worth, you're handing them the power to define it. And that's a power nobody else should ever hold over you. The real win isn't getting her back. It's becoming someone who never has to chase again. Not because you'll never want anyone again. Not because you'll become cold or unaffected by love. That's not the goal, and it's not even healthy. The goal is becoming someone whose sense of self doesn't collapse or rebuild itself based on who chooses him and who doesn't. Someone who can want a person deeply, be genuinely affected by loss, and still know, underneath it all, that his worth was never up for a vote in the first place. This is what separates people who actually recover from rejection and come out stronger from people who just move on to the next thing while carrying the same wound forward. The ones who truly heal do the internal work. They build a life that has its own weight, its own direction, its own sense of purpose that doesn't depend on anyone else's presence to feel valid. They develop interests, friendships, ambitions, physical and mental habits that make them feel solid on their own 2 feet. Not as a strategy to attract someone new, though that often happens as a side effect, but because building that kind of internal foundation is simply what a full life requires, with or without a partner in it. And here's the part I really want you to hear. When you become that kind of person, something shifts in how you experience relationships going forward. You stop entering them from a place of need and start entering them from a place of choice. You're not looking for someone to complete you or prove your worth. You're looking for someone to share an already full life with. That's a completely different foundation for love, and it's a far more stable one. Relationships built on need tend to be fragile because need makes people anxious, possessive, willing to compromise things they shouldn't. Relationships built on genuine choice from 2 people who are already whole on their own tend to be far more resilient because neither person is quietly terrified of losing the other in a way that distorts how they show up. So if you take one thing from everything we've covered today, the danger of chasing, the truth that rejection isn't a verdict, the strength in walking away with grace, what you're actually saved from, and the growth waiting on the other side of discomfort, let it be this final one. Stop trying to become someone worth chasing. Start becoming someone who's already whole, with or without her. That's not a consolation prize. That's the actual win. It always was. She may have chosen someone else. But if you let this moment build you instead of break you, you'll come out the other side having chosen something better for yourself, a life and a version of you that never needs anyone else's permission to feel complete.